The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty town of Tombstone in 1885, casting long shadows across the weathered wooden buildings that lined the main street. Sarah Mae Thompson sat on the rickety porch of the abandoned schoolhouse, her fingers tracing the worn wooden rail as she listened to the familiar sounds of the frontier town. At 17, she had been blind since birth, but her other senses had sharpened to an almost supernatural degree. She could distinguish between the heavy boots of the miners returning from the copper mines and the lighter steps of the townswomen heading to the general store. Today, however, something felt different. The air carried an unusual tension, like the moments before a thunderstorm breaks across the desert landscape. Her grandmother, Esther Thompson, had raised Sarah Mae alone after her parents mysteriously disappeared when she was just 3 years old. The old woman claimed they had died in an Apache raid, but Sarah Mae had always sensed there was more to the story. Esther would grow silent whenever Sarah Mae asked about her mother, changing the subject with a nervous clearing of her throat. The townspeople of Tombstone whispered behind their hands when they thought Sarah Mae couldn't hear, speaking in hushed tones about the night Margaret Thompson vanished without a trace, leaving behind only her wedding ring and a letter that no one would let Sarah Mae touch. The first hook came when Sarah Mae heard the distinctive sound of hoofbeats approaching from the direction of the old mine shaft. These weren't the regular horses she knew from town. This animal moved differently, with an almost ethereal grace that made her heart skip. As the sound grew closer, she detected something else that made her blood run cold. The soft humming of a woman's voice, a melody that seemed hauntingly familiar yet impossible to place. The tune drifted through the hot desert air like a ghostly whisper from another time. Sheriff William Curtis had been keeping watch over Sarah Mae since her grandmother's sudden death 3 weeks prior. The gruff lawman had promised Esther on her deathbed that he would protect the girl, though from what, he wasn't entirely certain. Esther's final words had been cryptic and troubling. The truth rides with the white mare, Will. When Sarah Mae hears her mother's song, you must be ready. At the time, Curtis had dismissed the old woman's rambling as fever-induced delirium. But now, watching Sarah Mae's face transform as she tilted her head toward the approaching sounds, he began to understand that something extraordinary was about to unfold. The white mare appeared at the end of Main Street like a vision from a dream. Her coat gleamed with an otherworldly luminescence that seemed to capture and reflect every ray of the desert sun. She moved with purpose, her hooves barely seeming to touch the ground as she approached the schoolhouse where Sarah Mae waited. The townspeople emerged from their buildings, drawn by an inexplicable compulsion to witness whatever was about to occur. Even the saloon fell silent as hardened miners and cowboys stepped onto the boardwalk to stare in amazement. Sarah Mae rose from her chair, her hand instinctively reaching out toward the sound of the approaching horse. The humming grew clearer now, and she recognized it with a shock that nearly brought her to her knees. It was the lullaby her grandmother used to sing when nightmares plagued her sleep, but Esther had always claimed she learned it from Sarah Mae's mother. The melody wrapped around Sarah Mae like a warm embrace, filling her with a longing she had carried her entire life without fully understanding its source. The mare stopped directly in front of the schoolhouse steps, and Sarah Mae descended slowly, her bare feet finding each wooden plank with practiced ease. The humming ceased, replaced by an expectant silence that seemed to hold the entire town in its grip. Sarah Mae extended her hand, palm up, in the universal gesture of peace she had learned to use with the stray animals that occasionally wandered into Tombstone. The mare stepped forward, lowering her magnificent head until her soft muzzle rested against Sarah Mae's fingertips. The moment of contact sent a jolt of electricity through Sarah Mae's entire being. Images flooded her mind with startling clarity, visions of a woman with long auburn hair identical to her own, riding this same white mare across the desert under a canopy of stars. She saw her mother's face for the first time, beautiful and wild, with eyes that held secrets deeper than the desert night. But there was something else in the vision, something that made Sarah Mae's heart race with both hope and terror. Her mother was alive, and she was being held prisoner somewhere in the vast expanse of the Arizona Territory. Sheriff Curtis approached cautiously, his hand resting on the grip of his Colt revolver. He had seen strange things in his 20 years of frontier law enforcement, but nothing had prepared him for the sight of Sarah Mae communicating wordlessly with the mysterious mare. The girl's face had taken on an almost ethereal quality, her sightless eyes wide with wonder as tears streamed down her sun-bronzed cheeks. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a conviction that chilled Curtis to the bone. "She's showing me where Mama is," Sarah May whispered, her fingers now tangled in the mare's silky mane. "All these years, I thought she was dead, but she's been calling to me. The Apache didn't take her, Sheriff. Someone else did. Someone who wanted her to disappear forever." The revelation hit Curtis like a physical blow. He remembered the night Margaret Thompson vanished, how the investigation had been mysteriously called off by orders from the territorial government. There had been rumors of a powerful man from back east who had taken an unhealthy interest in Margaret's unusual abilities that Sarah May had apparently inherited. The second hook emerged as Sarah May swung herself onto the mare's back with surprising agility. The horse seemed to understand her intentions perfectly, standing perfectly still as the blind girl settled herself on the animal's bare back. "I'm going to find her," Sarah May declared, her voice carrying across the silent street. "This mare is going to take me to wherever they've been keeping her hidden." Sheriff Curtis stepped forward, alarmed by the dangerous determination in the young woman's voice. "Sarah May, you can't just ride off into the desert alone," Curtis protested, even as he signaled to his deputy to prepare horses for pursuit. "That country is filled with Apache war parties, claim jumpers, and worse. If your mother is really out there, we need to organize a proper search party." But Sarah May shook her head, a sad smile playing across her lips. The mare had shown her things in those brief moments of contact, terrible truths about the forces that had torn her family apart and continued to threaten their reunion. "There isn't time," she replied, gently urging the mare to turn toward the desert. "The men who took her are planning to move her again tonight. They've been using her gift to locate silver and gold deposits across the territory, threatening to kill me if she doesn't cooperate. But they don't know about my connection to her, or about this mare who has been searching for us both all these years." The implications of Sarah May's words sent a chill through Curtis. He had heard whispers of a secret mining consortium that had been making impossible strikes throughout Arizona and New Mexico, finding precious metals in places where experienced prospectors had found nothing. As the mare began to move, Sarah May felt the familiar rhythm of hoofbeats beneath her, but this time it was different. The animal seemed to be following an invisible path across the desert, guided by instincts or knowledge that transcended normal understanding. Behind them, Sheriff Curtis and 3 of his most trusted deputies mounted their horses and gave chase, though they quickly realized that the white mare was moving at a pace that their ordinary horses could barely match. The animal seemed to glide across the rocky terrain, avoiding obstacles that would have challenged even experienced desert riders. The journey took them deep into the Dragoon Mountains, through narrow canyons and across treacherous ravines that most people would consider impassable. Sarah May clung to the mare's mane, trusting completely in the animal's supernatural ability to navigate the dangerous terrain. As they climbed higher into the mountains, she began to sense something else, the presence of her mother, growing stronger with each mile they covered. The connection between them, dormant for so many years, was finally awakening. Margaret Thompson had indeed been alive all these years, held captive by a ruthless businessman named Cornelius Blackwood, who had discovered her extraordinary ability to sense mineral deposits beneath the earth. Blackwood had orchestrated her kidnapping with the help of corrupt territorial officials, staging the Apache raid story to cover his tracks. For 14 years, Margaret had been forced to use her gift to make Blackwood incredibly wealthy, always under the threat that her daughter would be killed if she attempted to escape or contact the outside world. The white mare had been Margaret's companion before her capture, a gift from her Cherokee grandmother who had possessed similar abilities. The horse had been searching for Margaret ever since, guided by an ancient bond that connected all 3 generations of women. Now, finally, the mare was leading Sarah May to the hidden compound where her mother had been imprisoned in a life of forced servitude. As they approached the secret mining operation, Sarah May could hear the sounds of machinery and men's voices echoing off the canyon walls. The mare slowed to a careful walk, moving with the stealth of a wild creature avoiding predators. Sarah May's enhanced hearing picked up fragments of conversation that confirmed her worst fears. Blackwood was indeed planning to move Margaret that very night, taking her to a new location where she would be even more isolated and harder to find. The compound was heavily guarded, with armed men patrolling the perimeter and watching from elevated positions. Sarah May realized that a direct assault would be suicide, even with Sheriff Curtis and his deputies as backup. But the mayor seemed to have a plan, leading them to a hidden entrance that had been carved into the rock face by water erosion over countless centuries. The narrow passage was invisible from the main compound but provided access to the underground chambers where Margaret was being held. Sarah May slipped from the mare's back and felt her way along the rocky walls of the passage, her fingers reading the stone like others might read a book. The mare followed silently, her hooves making no sound on the smooth rock floor. As they descended deeper into the earth, Sarah May began to hear something that made her heart pound with anticipation. The same humming she had heard earlier, but now coming from somewhere ahead of them in the darkness. The reunion between mother and daughter was everything Sarah May had dreamed it would be, and more devastating than she could have imagined. Margaret Thompson, now a woman of 35 but looking older due to years of captivity and hardship, fell to her knees when she saw her daughter emerge from the shadows. The recognition was instant and overwhelming, despite the years that had passed and the changes that time had wrought in both of them. "My precious girl," Margaret whispered, pulling Sarah May into an embrace that seemed to heal something fundamental that had been broken inside both of them. "I felt you growing stronger every day, felt your gift awakening. I knew someday you would come for me." They clung to each other in the dim light of the underground chamber, tears flowing freely as 14 years of separation finally came to an end. The white mare stood guard at the entrance, her intelligent eyes watching for any sign of approaching danger. But their reunion was short-lived. The sound of boots echoing in the main tunnel announced the arrival of Blackwood and his men, alerted by one of the guards who had noticed the horses Sheriff Curtis had left at the canyon entrance. Margaret quickly explained the layout of the compound and the number of guards, information that would be crucial if they hoped to escape alive. She also revealed the full extent of Blackwood's operation, a network of kidnapped individuals with various supernatural abilities, all being exploited for financial gain across the Western Territories. The confrontation with Blackwood was as dramatic as it was dangerous. The corrupt businessman, a tall man with cold gray eyes and an expensive suit that looked out of place in the desert setting, had no intention of allowing his most valuable asset to escape. He had built an empire on Margaret's abilities and similar gifts from others he had captured over the years. When he saw Sarah May, his eyes lit up with avarice rather than concern. "Two for the price of one," Blackwood said with a cruel smile. "The daughter's gift is even stronger than the mother's. With both of them working for me, I'll be the wealthiest man west of the Mississippi." He signaled to his armed men, confident that his superior numbers would carry the day. But he had not counted on the intervention of Sheriff Curtis and his deputies, who had followed the sound of voices through the maze of tunnels and now emerged with guns drawn. The shootout that followed was brief but intense, echoing through the underground chambers like thunder. Sarah May and Margaret pressed themselves against the rock wall as bullets flew over their heads, the white mare positioning herself protectively in front of them. Sheriff Curtis and his men were outnumbered, but they had the advantage of knowing they were fighting for justice rather than greed. When the gun smoke finally cleared, Blackwood lay dead and most of his men had surrendered or fled into the desert. The discovery of Blackwood's operation led to a territory-wide investigation that exposed a network of corruption reaching into the highest levels of government. Dozens of kidnapped individuals were freed from similar compounds, and the illegal mining operations were shut down. Margaret and Sarah May testified before territorial judges, their courage helping to ensure that justice was served and that such atrocities would not be allowed to continue. The mother and daughter returned to Tombstone as heroes, but their greatest victory was simply being together again. Margaret took over the schoolhouse where Sarah May had spent so many lonely hours, turning it into a place of learning for all the children of the territory regardless of their background or abilities. Sarah May became known throughout Arizona as a gifted healer and counselor, using her supernatural senses to help others in ways that brought hope and comfort to countless families. The white mare remained with them always, a living symbol of the bond that could never be broken between the three generations of remarkable women. She became a legend in her own right, with stories spreading throughout the Western Territories about the mystical horse that had reunited a family and helped bring down one of the most corrupt operations in frontier history. Children would gather to hear Margaret tell the story of how her daughter's courage and the mare's loyalty had triumphed over greed and evil. Years later, when Sarah May had children of her own, she would take them to visit the mare in the pasture behind the schoolhouse. The horse, now showing her age but still magnificent, would nicker softly at the approach of the new generation, as if recognizing the continuation of something sacred and eternal. Sarah May would tell her children about the day she touched the wild mare and found her mother, teaching them that some bonds are stronger than time, distance, or the cruelty of those who seek to break them. The story became part of the folklore of the American Southwest, passed down through generations as a testament to the power of love, courage, and the mysterious connections that bind families together across impossible odds. The white mare lived to an extraordinary age, finally passing peacefully in the same pasture where she had spent her final years in contentment, surrounded by the family she had worked so hard to reunite. Margaret Thompson lived to see her grandchildren grow to adulthood. Her gift for finding precious things in the earth transformed into a talent for finding the precious qualities in every person she met. She never spoke bitterly of her years of captivity, choosing instead to focus on the joy of the years that followed and the knowledge that her sacrifice had ultimately led to the downfall of a great evil. Sarah May became one of the most respected women in the Arizona Territory, known for her wisdom, her kindness, and her uncanny ability to help people find what they had lost. Whether it was a missing loved one, a forgotten dream, or simply the courage to face another day. She never married, saying that the white mare and her mother's love had filled her heart so completely that there was no room for the ordinary passions that drove other people. The schoolhouse continued to operate for decades, becoming a symbol of hope and second chances for people throughout the region. A small plaque near the door bore a simple inscription that captured the essence of the remarkable story that had unfolded there. Some things that appear to be lost forever are simply waiting for the right moment to come home. The legend of the blind girl who touched a wild horse and found her mother became one of the most beloved stories of the Old West, inspiring countless others to believe in the possibility of miracles and the enduring power of family bonds. It served as a reminder that even in the harshest and most unforgiving landscapes, love could triumph over seemingly impossible obstacles, and that the most precious treasures were often those that could not be seen with ordinary eyes but only felt with the heart. 25 years had passed since that fateful day when Sarah May Thompson touched the white mare and discovered her mother was still alive. The Arizona Territory had become a state, and Tombstone had grown from a rough mining town into a more civilized community, but the legend of the blind girl and her mystical horse had only grown stronger with time. People came from as far away as California and Texas to hear the story firsthand, to see the schoolhouse where it all began, and perhaps to catch a glimpse of the mare who had made it all possible. Sarah May, now 42 years old, had never lost the ethereal quality that had made her remarkable as a young woman. Her hair, still the same auburn shade as her mother's, was now streaked with silver that caught the desert sunlight like threads of precious metal. She moved through the world with a confidence that came not from sight, but from an understanding of life's deeper mysteries that few people ever achieved. The schoolhouse had become more than just a place of learning. It had evolved into a sanctuary where people brought their troubles, their lost children, and their broken dreams, knowing that somehow Sarah May would help them find what they were seeking. Margaret Thompson, now 60 years old, had become the unofficial historian of their remarkable story. She spent her evenings on the porch of the house they had built behind the schoolhouse, writing in a leather-bound journal that documented not just their own experiences, but the stories of all the people they had helped over the years. Her gift for finding precious things in the earth had transformed into something even more valuable, an ability to find the precious qualities hidden within every human soul who crossed their path. The white mare, though showing her advanced age with a slightly grayed muzzle and a more measured pace, remained as magnificent as ever. Veterinarians who examined her claimed she should have died years ago, given what they estimated to be her true age, but she continued to thrive in ways that defied natural explanation. Local Apache elders who visited the schoolhouse spoke respectfully of the mare as a spirit guide, a bridge between the world of the living and the realm of ancestors who watched over their descendants with loving care. On this particular autumn evening, as the desert prepared for the cooler months ahead, Sarah May sat beside the mare in the pasture where she had spent countless peaceful hours over the years. The animal rested her great head in Sarah May's lap, a gesture of trust and affection that never failed to move those who witnessed it. Margaret approached from the house, carrying a telegram that had arrived earlier that day from the territorial governor's office in Phoenix. "They want to write our story into the official state history," Margaret said, settling onto the wooden bench that Sheriff Curtis had built beside the pasture fence years earlier. "They're calling it one of the most remarkable tales of justice and family love in the entire Southwest." Sarah May smiled, her fingers gently stroking the mare's neck as she considered this honor. The recognition meant less to her than the knowledge that their story had inspired so many others to never give up hope, no matter how impossible their circumstances might seem. Sheriff Curtis, now retired but still a frequent visitor to the schoolhouse, had often remarked that the case of Margaret Thompson's kidnapping and rescue had changed his entire understanding of what was possible in the world. The corruption they had exposed had led to reforms that protected vulnerable people throughout the Western Territories, ensuring that others would not suffer as Margaret had suffered. The illegal mining operations had been completely dismantled, and the wealth that Blackwood had accumulated through exploitation had been distributed to his victims and their families. The evening ritual that had developed over the years began as the sun started its descent toward the desert horizon. Children from the town, both students from the schoolhouse and others who simply loved to hear the stories, gathered in the pasture to listen as Margaret recounted different aspects of their adventures. Tonight, she chose to tell them about the network of people they had helped reunite over the years, families separated by tragedy, lovers divided by circumstance, and friendships broken by misunderstandings that had festered for decades. "The gift that my mother passed down to me, and that I passed to Sarah May, isn't really about finding gold or silver in the ground," Margaret explained to the children who sat cross-legged in the grass around her. "It's about recognizing the connections that bind us all together, the invisible threads that link every heart to every other heart, even when we think we're completely alone." The children listened with rapt attention, their young faces glowing in the soft light of the desert sunset. Sarah May added her own perspective, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had lived through extraordinary experiences but remained humble about their significance. "When I first touched this mare all those years ago, I thought she was going to help me find my mother. And she did, but she also helped me understand that we're all searching for something we think we've lost. Sometimes it's a person, sometimes it's a dream, and sometimes it's just the part of ourselves that we gave up on too soon." The white mare lifted her head as if listening to every word, her intelligent eyes seeming to hold depths of understanding that went beyond animal instinct. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Margaret shared the decision that she and Sarah May had been discussing for months. They were planning to establish a foundation that would help other people with unusual gifts, providing them with protection and support rather than allowing them to be exploited as Margaret had been. The foundation would be funded by the royalties from a book that Margaret was writing about their experiences, and it would be headquartered right there at the schoolhouse that had become so central to their lives. "We've learned that gifts like ours come with responsibilities," Sarah May explained to the gathered listeners. "We're meant to use them not for personal gain, but to help heal the wounds that life inflicts on all of us. Every person who comes here carrying pain or searching for something they've lost becomes part of our family. Part of the story that started when a blind girl touched a wild horse and discovered that love is stronger than any force that tries to tear families apart." The white mare rose to her feet with dignified grace, moving to the center of the circle where everyone could see her clearly. In the starlight, her coat seemed to glow with the same mysterious luminescence that had marked her first appearance in Tombstone so many years earlier. She stood there for a long moment, as if posing for a portrait that would capture this perfect evening for all eternity, before walking slowly to each person present and gently touching them with her muzzle in what could only be described as a blessing. Margaret closed her journal and looked out over the desert that had been home to so much sorrow but had ultimately become the setting for one of the most beautiful love stories ever told. "Some people spend their whole lives searching for miracles," she said softly, never realizing that they're surrounded by them every single day. The miracle isn't that Sarah May found me, or that this mare lived long enough to bring us together. The miracle is that we learn to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, the sacred in the simple moments when we choose love over fear, hope over despair, and connection over isolation. As the evening wound down and people began to make their way back to town, Sarah May remained in the pasture with the mare, continuing a conversation that needed no words and understood no boundaries of species or circumstance. The bond between them had become legendary, but for Sarah May, it was simply the most natural thing in the world, a friendship that had saved her life and continued to enrich it every single day. The white mare would live for several more years, becoming the most beloved animal in the entire territory and inspiring countless stories, songs, and works of art. When she finally passed away peacefully in her sleep, the entire community mourned her loss, but they also celebrated the incredible legacy she had left behind. Her story had become inseparable from the story of the family she had helped reunite, and both tales would be told for generations to come as proof that miracles were not only possible but inevitable when hearts remained open to the mysterious workings of love and destiny. The schoolhouse continued to operate long after Sarah May and Margaret had joined the mare in whatever realm awaits those who dedicate their lives to serving others. The foundation they established grew into a nationwide network that protected and supported people with unusual abilities, ensuring that the exploitation Margaret had suffered would never happen to anyone else. The building itself became a historical landmark, preserved exactly as it had been during the years when two remarkable women used their gifts to heal a broken world one heart at a time. Visitors to the site often reported feeling a sense of peace and possibility that was difficult to explain, as if the love that had flourished there for so many years had somehow become part of the very stones and timber of the structure. Children who played in the pasture where the white mare had lived claimed they could sometimes hear the soft sound of hoofbeats in the evening breeze, accompanied by a woman's gentle humming that seemed to promise that no one who truly needed help would ever be forgotten or abandoned. The legend of Mama, Is That You? Became one of the most cherished stories in American folklore, a testament to the power of family bonds to survive any hardship and the truth that some connections transcend even death itself. It reminded everyone who heard it that miracles were not rare, supernatural events, but daily opportunities to choose love over fear, to extend helping hands to those in need, and to believe that even the most impossible dreams could come true when approached with courage, faith, and an open heart willing to touch the wild beauty that exists all around us, waiting only for someone brave enough to reach out and make contact with the extraordinary.